Dear colleagues, I am happy to see that many of you are still able to get up early in the morning and to be here. And it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Ülo Valk. He is professor of Estonian and Comparative Folkloristics. And if you are wondering why folkloristics at all, then, for example, I don't know how it is in your country, but in our country, folklore is the basis of our national identity. Without folklore, we are nothing. And we are proud that we are some of the largest collection of folkloric texts, which is unique. And we are not only looking backward at our old collections, but we are collecting new material all the time. And that's what the Professor Ülo Valk and his students are doing. And not only in Estonia, but also in northern India, and who knows where. We will hear about this, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Anne, for this kind introduction. I don't think that this paper has much to do with our national identity. Rather, it is about the transnational identity, or maybe about the human condition in general, going beyond, religious boundaries and boundaries of secularity. But I thank the organizers for inviting me to talk at this inspiring forum, even though perhaps I don't have so much to add to this interreligious debates and discussion to these theories. So I'm talking about something quite simple, about strange, unexpected experiences and epistemological uncertainties in everyday life, things that we don't understand. And sometimes these cases are so out of the ordinary, so powerful, that the rational frames of interpretation just remain too narrow. The events are so meaningful, and memories of them can be so vivid that it is just impossible to debunk these experiences with blunt rationality of our generally so secular mindsets, at least in this country. So, folklorists are used to work with narratives, with stories, so I start with a reference to a grand narrative, this magnum opus, Charles Taylor's monumental book about secularization, book that you probably know much better than I do. And he has outlined here the fundamental changes in the Western mindset that have carried us to the age of modernity. As Taylor writes, it was around the year 1500 when the presence of God was still undeniable, forming a kind of existential template. People lived in the natural world, which testified divine purpose and action. God was involved in all aspects of social life. And the world was enchanted, referring to Max Weber's notion of Entzauberung, disenchantment. According to the prediction of Weber, magical thinking was fading away to be replaced with rationality and scientific thought. Instead of supernatural powers, our new world is ruled by technology. This Taylor's influential book has inspired many responses and debates. One of them is working with secular age, offering an array of multidisciplinary reflections. The point of view that I would like to introduce today is from folkloristics. And I address this Weber's assertive claim of the decline of the supernatural in modernity. Well, Charles Taylor himself wrote an afterword to this book, Working with Secular Age, where he explained again what he means by disenchantment. And I quote him, "The enchanted world which disenchantment brought to an end was a world full of spirits and moral forces embedded in things like relics and love potions. In this world, it was generally agreed that such spirits and forces existed. But this isn't the only difference from our own time. there is also the fact that people in those days encountered or saw themselves as encountering such forces, in being cured by a relic or sensing a hostile spirit in the forest. And for them, this was a straightforward description of their experience, not an interpretive gloss which they were adding with whatever warrant. I wanted to stress that there was a real difference in experience and not simply in beliefs which people held. We, I mean most of us in North Atlantic societies, have been trained out of this experience. We can't have it, even if we try. Well, folklorists have been working with such narratives about the supernatural encounters for a long time, since early 19th century, and I go through very briefly some major strategies and frames of interpretation of how humans have been interacting with the world of spirits. What are the possible outlooks, ways how to make sense of this. From the point of view of Christian demonology, nature spirits were interpreted as fallen angels, and this definition provided them with an ontological status. There was no need to doubt their existence. From the clerical perspective, communication with the spirits was dangerous. Worshipping them as false gods was a violation of the first commandment, the sin of idolatry. And as they were expelled from the Christian cosmos and they were marginalized, the whole set of spirits, ghosts, apparitions, they formed a kind of dark powers in this world at the ages of existence and ages of Christian culture. During the 18th and 19th century, the spirit world was reinterpreted and all lumped together under the category of superstition. Aberglaube started to dominate then. So we can talk about the othering of the other world, of the spirit's world, and eliminating it altogether as superstitions. And this attitude, this outlook was reinforced by Enlightenment. So Protestant theology and Enlightenment, they joined their forces like this in giving this pejorative meaning and trying to eliminate the whole sphere from human experience and interaction. Now, with the rise of Romanticism, attitude changed radically. Literary scholars and early folklorists saw value in this residual knowledge about the supernatural. And from here on, I would say that folklore and clerical doctrines were set apart. There goes a kind of watershed about the attitudes. The discursive link between the two, folkloristic and theological view, was maintained through one important concept, the concept of belief, Glaube, so essential in Protestant Christianity. But from empirical entities, spirits were turned into objects of belief. On one hand, they were internalized into the mental sphere, and they were externalized to the realm of fiction. So the Romantic writers interpreted the supernatural from a literary perspective as a kind of narrative heritage. That's how the genre of legend, Saga, was invented, referring to stories about mysterious powers told as true in a conversational mode. The Grimm brothers helped to establish and warrant the legendary as a resource of knowledge. And that's a reference to a new book about the Grimm brothers, about the Deutsche Sagen, it's mainly about the heritage of the Germanic-speaking peoples and the role of these stories in inventing national identities, not only in Germany, but also in other countries, what Anne was referring as one of the missions that folklorists have had in 19th and 20th centuries. So the Grimm brothers were looking for the survivals of the pre-Christian beliefs among the peasantry and considered legends as pieces of valuable information about the past. And secondly, as I said, the legendary was transformed into a literary canon expressing a romantic poetic outlook, naturpoesie, We can talk about fictionalization and folklorization of the spirit world, separating it from the lived experience to the realm of aesthetic enjoyment or Gothic horror. To create the distance from the supernatural, another strategy emerged. Admitting one's own supernatural experiences became problematic, but it was okay, it was fine to ascribe it to the others, to someone else, let's say to some backward folks living in the next village behind the forest, or to people, our ancestors, dear ancestors who lived in the past, who yet didn't know about the reality of the world. So next, I have to talk a little bit about the pathologization of the supernatural experience. And in Estonia, in this country, it gained ground quite early, in the beginning of 19th century. So I give one example. Okay, here it comes. And that's from the Estonian newspaper Maarahva Nädalaleht, the weekly of the country people, issue published in 1822. It was published by clergyman Otto Wilhelm Masing, here in North Tartu County in Äksi parish. And he was critical of the Herrnhut movement of the Brethren and of their ecstatic prayer meetings, and the prayer meetings involved interaction with the devil who tended to appear. And of course, he had to be warded off, it is expelled from these meetings. So in one article, Masing discusses 10 cases of people who had been harassed by the devil. And there were 7 women and 3 men involved, and the meetings with the devil had been terrifying. The people could not sleep, they could not eat, they fell seriously ill. So they came to Masing to ask for help from the clergyman. And in discussing these cases, Masing introduced a psychological interpretation, writing that such experiences are typical to people with fearful, weak, and soft hearts. Masing discussed the cases in detail as examples of mental illness, vaimuhaigus. He wrote that the evil spirit has nothing to do here and he has no guilt. Masing claims that what people see in such a state of mind is an empty delusion, vaimu varjutamine, or a dream, he added. The same is true about seeing or hearing revenants, spirits, apparitions, and ghosts that ignorant people speak about. So, supernatural experiences did not fit the enlightened world in Europe. And I'm referring to this book by Oliver Sacks, Hallucinations. He writes that it was in the 1830s in psychiatrics when the earlier concept of apparitions was replaced with the term hallucination. And as he defines it, hallucinations are percepts arising in the absence of any external reality, seeing things or hearing things that are not there. End of quote. In his book, he considers the role of hallucinations in culture. He discusses how hallucinations have given rise to our art, folklore, and even religion. He writes that in modern culture, hallucinations are considered to portend madness or something dire happening to the brain, and there is a great stigma here, and patients are often reluctant to admit to hallucinating, afraid that their friends and even the doctors will think they are losing their minds. And the blurb on the book cover declares, hallucinations don't belong wholly to the insane. Quite, I don't know whether it is encouraging or discouraging, but the stigma is definitely there. When you hallucinate, there is a problem involved, likely. So the stigma is there. And today it is safer to project apparitions into the story world, to claim that the supernatural has no true existence beyond old belief, beyond superstitions and art. And indeed, folklorists, 19th, 20th century folklorists worked hard to support this claim, pushing the supernatural into the world of legendary fiction and Gothic imagination. That was our role in this project of enlightenment. We participated in this, no doubt about that. So the massive project of collecting folklore and turning legendary into a literary genre concealed the experiential side to a great extent. And it seemed a kind of major discovery in the 1960s when Lauri Hongo published this grand monograph, Geisterglauber in Ingermanland, the belief in spirits in the land of Inger, Finnish district here at the Gulf of Finland. And Lauri Hongo showed that the stories about spirits are rooted in experiences, that spirits are empirical creatures for the people who share these traditions. Well, he introduced also a psychological interpretation of these narrative traditions. And later the works of American folklorist David Hufford, who was holding a double degree in psychiatrics and in folkloristics, got it from the University of Pennsylvania, and he confirmed that without doubt some encounters with the supernatural are real on psychological level. And well, today a lot is going on. I can't go into the discussion about the genre theory, referring to the work of Laura Felt, Dirk Johansen, and many others who have shown that there is no essential difference between fictional and religious discourse. And we can talk about the supernatural affordance of fiction, of film, and legendary as a genre has the power to affect the perception of the world, evoking the supernatural. And here I come to the first example that I would like to discuss with you today. And this comes, well, here are some references to this important monographs, also reference to the book by Gillian Bennett, a British folklorist who studied the experiences of English women, mainly elderly ladies, about communication with the dead and the related storytelling tradition in UK. But the first example, from 1991, when I was doing fieldwork, and I refer to the collections in Estonian folklore archives. There are more than 1.5 million pages of manuscripts, audio and video recordings, so it's a huge resource of knowledge. And these are my field notes from Torma Parish, North Tartu County. 1991 was a period of transition from communism to freedom. Communist ideology and state atheism had already collapsed. Everything that had been forbidden was now freely available. Religious doctrines, spiritual doctrines, uncensored history, even pornography was available, so it was a very interesting time. And certainly it was a good time to study the supernatural, as people were not afraid anymore to discuss something that had been silenced in this atmosphere of state atheism. And I met a woman who told me, well, the question was, have you heard about something mysterious or extraordinary, or have you witnessed something? And of course she remembered something from her own experience, a scary experience when she was a young girl. She was born in 1929, so the event happened in mid-1930s, and have, well, closed and changed her name in the story. And here comes the story of the translation of this. The Estonian original was just here. I was around 6 or 7 years old, and I had the following vision, nägemine, at home. I slept in the back room and was quite awake. I heard my mum frying potatoes in the pan. She shouted, "Alma, come to eat." But I could not go to the kitchen. I could not stand up. Suddenly, a young woman appeared in front of my bed. She was around 20 years old and had a long blonde hair. She was wearing a red cap beret. She was thin, bony, and had shoes with high heels. She walked cups, cups, cups. She didn't say a word and took me in her lap. When she grabbed me, her hair floated on two sides. She had a long white dress. She carried me to the window. I wanted to call my mom, but I could not. The window was open. Then she dropped me and vanished. She started dissipating like a shadow, rose to the ceiling, and fell apart as a broad shadow. After some time, I could go to the kitchen. So a lot of details that the woman remembers from childhood. It must have been a very memorable, a vivid, powerful experience. And she added some comments. This was a strange thing. I was not asleep, I was awake. I think it was a UFO. I can see it vividly even now. She did not say anything and stared at me. She took me into her lap and looked at me. She had beautiful hair. She was narrow, slender face. She had a narrow, slender face, a very beautiful woman. Such a scary story. I was horrified that she would carry me away. My mother asked where this woman came from. Did she come through the kitchen door? Where did she go? Mother had also heard the sound of the footsteps on heels. Now I think that it cannot be anything other than a UFO. Maybe it was a prediction that I would have a hard life, that my mother would die. I told about this event to my teachers, and we told it to the neighbors, but nobody had a clue. Nobody knew about the UFOs yet. So what we can see here, we can see very emotional reflections of the event, and also that what followed was a kind of public discussion, even bringing this event to the teachers and talking it about this with the neighbors, without nobody understanding what had happened to the girl. But what to think about this framework of aliens and UFOs introduced by the storyteller? The link is quite obvious here. During the years 1990 and 91, there was an extremely popular TV series that was produced by Estonian television, by the state television, Monologue with a Stranger. It was dedicated to UFO cases in Estonia, and a topic that immediately, started to dominate the vernacular storytelling. The story above was about the personal experience, but we saw that the meaning of the event remained obscure until interpretation was given around 55 years later. So, in short, the woman was convinced that this was a case of a failed alien abduction. But reflecting on the story as a folklorist, I would say that it does include several motives that have been associated with the devil. Usually it's the devil in Estonian beliefs who carries away unbaptized babies, sometimes also abducts children or even adults, but there is a strong association of abducting unbaptized babies. And when stealing the babies, then the devil often appears in a female guise, as a woman, as a strange woman. And here we saw there was a little detail, a vivid description of the woman, but then this red cap, the red beret. And the red color is often connected with the devil, and also people draw attention sometimes to some details in his appearance, and a strange hat or a cap very often figures in these descriptions. So in theory we could add another interpretation, but of course let's keep what the woman had, and still we can leave it open what happened. But now it's time to say something about the vernacular turn in folkloristics, and something about the work of Leonard Norman Primiano, who introduced the concept and the methodology of vernacular religion. By definition, religion as it is lived, as he defined it, as human beings encounter, understand, interpret, and practice it. Vernacular religious theory involves an interdisciplinary approach to the study of the religious lives of individuals, with special attention to the process of religious belief, the verbal, behavioral, and material expressions of religious belief, and the ultimate object of religious belief. And just to bring in another simple explanation what vernacular religion is, I would like to call for help of my colleague in England, Dr. Marian Bowman, who has written a lot about this approach, and she has eloquently defined it in this podcast, in the Religious Studies Project podcast, Vernacular Religion. So please, could we listen to this little audio?
What we're actually talking about in relation to the study of vernacular religion is religion as it's lived. That everyday religion, the part that belief, worldview plays in everyday life. So in the food you eat, in the way you see the world, possibly in how you dress, possibly who you associate or don't associate with, and so on, in the myriad little details of everyday life, the way that religion has an impact on that. So when we're talking about vernacular religion and stressing that it's religion as it's lived, This isn't necessarily a neat, well thought out set of beliefs that are well articulated and so on. It's how you do religion. It's what people do in relation to their worldview in everyday life. The reason people started using the term vernacular religion is very much related to the use of vernacular architecture in the study of architecture, the idea that buildings, architecture turn out differently in different places because you use local materials. So you can construct a house, but whether that house is in rough stone or wood or whatever will be created by local conditions. And so things turn out differently because you use slightly different materials. So to some extent, using vernacular gives the idea of coming from where people are and also allowing for the fact that there is huge possible variety in the way that people do religion.
Thank you, Mary, and let's stop here and ask the question, what is the difference with earlier philologically oriented folkloristics? When we talk about intextualization and transcription of interviews, it disconnects us from the spoken word and from its lived social context. Studying folklore as a textual corpus means studying folklore from a distance. Vernacular perspective brings us to the grassroots level, to localities, to communication, to speech acts, people meeting people. It enables attention to individuals, to details in storytelling and personal reflections, what we call vernacular theorizing today. So vernacular approach is inductive. It starts from particular cases and personal views. And I would say all such supernatural encounters and the narratives about them, they are quite unique, they are individual. And these experiences, they give rise to micro narratives in quite personalized settings. And the interpretive frameworks, usually they are not fixed. They are quite flexible, they are shifting, they are changing, they involve creativity. In public discourse in Estonia today, the ghostly and supernatural experiences are often interpreted as hallucinations, as mental disorders. Discourse of stigmatization is there. People generally don't talk about the supernatural experiences in public. I think it's a privilege of a folklorist to do it here. So these conversations usually remain in quite private settings. And the supernatural in Estonia today, it has a little bit ghostly undertones. They would say that the society is haunted by its dramatic and tragic history. It keeps coming back in experiences in storytelling. So I come to the next short example. It's a small narrative told me by a man in the 50s, just a couple of years ago. And the story is about the haunted house. People who had lived there had told him that sometimes a mysterious lady appears, walks through the house at night. She opens the door, looks at you, and then disappears. It was thought to be a spirit of an old woman. But here comes the story. We were renovating the house. Once I stayed there overnight, I was alone. It was an old wooden building with 4 rooms. I was sleeping and I heard a sound on the stairs between 2 floors. Somebody was walking there. It was going on and on. There were 4 doors in the building, all locked. My mother-in-law, future mother-in-law, actually used to lock them. Of course, I didn't go to see. I pulled the blanket across my head. Suddenly, I heard the sound of someone opening the door. It was said that the spirit used to open the door and look inside. Of course, my head was covered with a blanket until the morning. In the morning, I stood up and checked the door, and the lock was open. 100% it had been locked in the evening. So what to say about this story? The kind of epilogue was that the man said that during the war, the house had been hit by a bomb. Everybody on the upper floor had died. So the ghost was somebody who had lived in the house. And one more example. And now this is from one of the students of Folkoristics. Last autumn, again, I was teaching the class, the general introduction into folkloristics, and one of the assignments that the students had to do some contribution to the Estonian folklore archives. They had choice, a lot of choice, what to write about them. There were around 60 students in the class, and there were 17 of them who decided to write about the supernatural experiences, and most of them wrote about their own experiences, or experience of somebody whom they know very, very well, this out of the ordinary events that they vividly remember. And I just chose one of them, written by a young woman. This is my own experience. A week after my daughter was born, I saw my father sitting on my bed beside my feet. Now, the issue is that the father was dead, actually. It comes in the story. A clock was next to the bed. It was 3 p.m. My father was wearing a white shirt and black trousers. He had a black belt and brown shoes. First, he looked at the cradle where his first grandchild was sleeping, and then he looked at me. He smiled and asked me to stop crying. His voice was, as usual, a bit like Marko Matvere's voice, but lower. A very personal memory, famous Estonian actor, it is, everybody knows him. The case was supernatural because 3 days before my daughter's birth, he had committed suicide. He lived 80 kilometers from me, and we were not very close. First, I told my life partner about the event, but after a month, I shared it with my mother and friend. My partner thought that my father came to console me, as he saw from above that I was constantly sad. Mother concluded that we should think about the living and stop thinking about the father. She said that perhaps it was a message from the other world that he was alive and was moving on. My friend thought my father wanted to see the grandchild and console me. My friend had also had a meeting with her dead grandfather, who said one sentence and then went out through the door. So the friend had also had a similar kind of experience. The woman commented that she had heard that the spirits of their close ones sometimes appear in a dream or at night, but she thought that this was a mere fantasy. She said that she would not believe it if this would not have been her own experience. So what is remarkable about this experience? The event itself, appearance of the dead relative, is quite common, not unique at all. Differently from the previous case, the visit of the dead father is emotionally positive. The young mother talks about the event and gets encouraging feedback from the others. Nobody questions the experience, but confirms its reality. Indeed, it must have been his father contacting her and coming with a good intention. As regards the interpretive framework, the dead and the other world, well, that's a topic that dominates contemporary storytelling of the supernatural. There is no dominant belief system about afterlife in Estonia today, but people often share personal experience narratives about the appearance of the dead, offering pieces of evidence about post-mortal existence. The materialist worldview remains too narrow to accommodate this knowledge. So Oliver Sacks would definitely classify the event as a hypnopompic hallucination, something seen with open eyes, projected into external space. And of course, this interpretation is possible, it is there. Yet, this interpretation doesn't help to understand the meaning of the experience. And that's far more important, what this meeting meant for this young woman. And now it's time to come to the concluding discussion, to come to the end of this talk. And I come back to the book by Charles Taylor, to the quote that I gave in the beginning. I wanted to stress that there was a real difference in experience and not simply in beliefs which people held. I mean most of us in North Atlantic societies have been trained out of this experience. We can't have it, even if we try. And now, just to do justice to Taylor, the quote actually continues. What remains is some sense of the uncanny. This experience is accompanied by a sense of ontic indefiniteness, similar to that which emerges with the subtle languages of post-romantic poetry. Now sensing the uncanny has features in common with earlier encounters of moral forces. In both cases, the experience is out of the ordinary. We are encountering something which is beyond the banal and is in some sense mysterious, but this is no longer a defined force recognized in our world. Well, there is plenty of evidence in Estonia, and it's a very secular country, to show that the reality is different. Well, people have the experiences. And according to a poll that was conducted by the Council of Churches in Estonia, it is about 32.5% of people in Estonia who have had either supernatural or some other inexplicable experiences that is impossible to explain rationally. So about one third of people. And certainly we can agree with Taylor that defining the force behind these mysterious events often it remains obscure. It is not clear for the people. The discussion is going on. We can see this creativity that comes from the epistemological uncertainty as a problem. Creativity, it inspires thinking, it inspires reflections. And if we ask the question, it is, can we say that the experience has remained the same, let's say from the Middle Ages through the early modern time to modern time, 21st century? I don't think so. It's not quite accurate. The experiences have changed. And definitely what has changed, it's the interpretive frameworks. They have been changing radically. And attitudes towards these experiences have been changing in time. One can find multiple interpretive frameworks today, including religious frameworks of interpretation. But generally, it is easier today to locate the supernatural within the context of fiction, film, computer games, art. That's where we get this sense of the uncanny, that also Taylor was writing about. And it can be approached from many perspectives: aesthetics of religion, psychology, cognitive studies can offer valuable perspectives to understand these experiences that evoke strong attitudes, feelings, and affections. But what about belief? Is it a good, necessary category? Here it is, I would say, the question about belief becomes relevant together with storytelling. When we have to decide, we have to take a stand whether we take these stories seriously or not. We consider them as mere entertainment. From a vernacular perspective, the supernatural is often not a matter of belief. It's a matter of knowledge, a matter of experience. And there is no need to deny the factuality that experience is there. The interpretive frameworks are much more open for critical reflections and debate. So I stop here and leave it open for discussion. Thank you very much.